attacks them. For the United States, they're a terrorist organization. You can't support them. But they seem to be the ones who've saved the Yazidi in northern Iraq, who beat back the ISIS attack on Erbil. Their affiliates are doing most of the fighting around Kobane. But they're an enemy. They're not allowed to be in the coalition. The main force in the region that ISIS is expanding into is that could overcome them is Iran. But we're not allowed to have dealings with Iran because they disobeyed orders in 1979. We got to punish them for that. They overthrew a tyrant that the U.S. had imposed, and it's not acceptable. A lot wrong with the Iranian government, no question about that. But those aren't the reasons for the exclusion of Iran from the coalition of the willing. Well, try to find. You can't find any objection, virtually no objection to this in the political class and their literature. And it goes on in case after case. There was actually a pretty remarkable case just about a week ago. There was a lead article in the New York Times, the main article on the front page, which should have had the headline, the U.S. officially declares itself to be the world's leading terrorist state. That's what the content of the article was. The article reported a CIA study that had just come out, which apparently had been commissioned by Obama, which investigated the U.S. intervention to try to find, in the past, to find which cases succeeded, which cases failed, and what factors were that led to success. And it landed with a quote from Obama saying that he commissioned such studies, and unfortunately, they didn't seem to succeed very often, which is a problem. Take a look at the cases that were mentioned in the first paragraph. There were three: Cuba, Angola, and Nicaragua. Each of those cases a major terrorist attack, a major terrorist atrocity. Not to run through it, but that's what they were, uncontroversial. So we announced that we have carried out 3 major terrorist atrocities, and the only question that arises is, did they work? If they didn't work, why didn't they work? Can we do it better next time? Next, look at the reaction. See if you saw one letter, one comment by any commentator saying, wait a minute, there's something funny about this. We're declaring ourselves to be the major terrorist state in the world, and we're proud of it, and we only ask whether it works or not. Unfortunately, that's the reality that we face.
Thank you.
See, I don't think that the contradiction is between a republic and empire. I don't think that there's necessarily a contradiction between them. In U.S. history, it would be one thing if we were saying a democratic republic versus empire. But the U.S. was constructed as a white republic. And I think that that's very important. And because it was constructed as a white republic, there was no contradiction. It was perceived in that existence of a republic and an empire. Some of the things that Professor Chomsky was mentioning earlier about the westward expansion, the wars against Native Americans, the seizing of northern Mexico, etc., were completely consistent if you envision the United States as a white republic and you saw that right towards an empire. At this point in history, I mentioned in my talk that I would look at the United States as serving to a great extent as the repressive arm of global capitalism. It's not operating by itself. It's not operating and all these other forces are simply subordinate to it. We have witnessed with neoliberal globalization some very profound changes and the development of this transnational capitalist class that has in many respects changed entire issues of sovereignty. The United States is well positioned, since there is no global capitalist state, the United States is positioned to operate as the repressive apparatus for that. And it does it very effectively. And obviously there's contradictions within this capitalist class, it's transnational. But I think that the U.S. sees itself that that's the role that they're supposed to play. Now within the U.S. ruling group, there are differences about the extent to which that role should be unilateral versus multilateral. This is something that we saw in the lead up to the Iraq invasion. To what extent should the U.S. be collaborating with other forces in making decisions? And I don't mean collaborating with Fiji, but I mean collaborating with other major capitalist powers in making decisions. And that decision, that issue is something that actually tears apart or is a source of contradiction within the U.S. ruling group.
Okay, questions? Yes.
Yes.
Could you say your name and where you're from?
Rita Lundberg from Newton, Mass. Professor Chomsky, I have a question for you. Ever since, and it concerns the character of President Barack Obama. Ever since Barack Obama was elected, it's always struck me that he seems more Republican than the Republicans. He's expanded the invasion of Afghanistan, he's increased the amount of drone warfare. In so many ways, he's so Republican, and yet the Republicans demonize him, someone who really has so much in common with him. In fact, when he and Mitt Romney debated in the presidential debates, their foreign policies sounded so similar that you could almost not tell them apart. And so I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are about the essence, and why right now they're talking about working together. They could work together very well. Not that I think it's a good thing at all, but I find it alarming.
Could you hear? Let's see if I have just the question pointed out that Barack Obama's policies were pretty much, foreign policies were pretty much Republican policies. So why did the Republicans dedicate themselves to one program? They've actually, Republican parties have one policy since Obama was elected: ruin the country and hope that people will blame it on Obama. Plenty of reasons behind this. That's been the one policy and it didn't work. So why didn't they just cooperate with him since he had a Republican foreign policy? I think this goes back to a significant change that's taken place in the whole American political system in the past roughly 50 years. There used to be a kind of a quip back in the 1950s. I think maybe it comes from C. Wright Mills, that the United States is a one-party state, the business party, with two factions, Democrats and Republicans. So that's no longer true. The United States is still a one-party state, but it only has one faction, and it's not Democrats. It's moderate Republicans. The people who are now Democratic, New Democrats, are basically what used to be called moderate Republicans. It's often said there are no more moderate Republicans. That's not true. They run the Democratic Party. Both parties have shifted to the right. The Republicans have shifted so far that they are not a political party any longer. And one of the leading conservative political analysts, Norman Ornstein, American Enterprise Institute, very respected right-wing analyst, he describes the Republicans today as a radical insurgency who have abandoned the parliamentary system. They are so dedicated to serving private power, wealth, corporate power, that they're just off the spectrum. And they can't get votes that way. So they've been compelled to do something pretty new in American politics. There are sectors of the population that have always been there, but they've never been really politically mobilized. It's a very religious country. It's one of the most, maybe the most fundamentalist countries in the world. The AG groups that I was talking about. They were never organized as a political force. Now they are. Native everyone is, we've been white Anglo-Saxons, now they are taking it away. The fear that I talked about is rampant. That's been organized. The popular base for the party is now a collection of constituencies that, as Bill pointed out, mass constituencies can often be pretty frightening, and these are. Well, that's what happens when you become a radical insurgency, and we see it. So yes, Obama was following a moderate Republican policy, but that's not enough for the radical insurgency. So they want something much more extreme. And actually, as you know, I'm sure there's a split in the Republican Party between the Republican establishment, say Romney, which is kind of old-fashioned moderate Republican, and the base, which is the constituencies they mobilize. And they're stuck in a fight, in an internal fight, constant internal fight to see whether the establishment, the bankers, the hedge fund managers, and so on, can control the base that they've mobilized. And they're having a problem with it. Often they can. You see that we saw in the primary elections, particularly in 2008, also in 2012. If you watch the Republican primaries, candidates kept coming up from the base, each one nuttier than the last. Backman, just crazy people. And the Republican establishment didn't like it. They poured money in to attack ads, to denunciations, to try to destroy these people who were coming from the base, so they could finally get them on a Republican, which they did. But that's an internal struggle in the radical insurgency, and I think that's what you're seeing in the case of Obama.
Bill's going to respond as well, and then we'll take, I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Yeah, so first I would say, and I want to agree and disagree with something that Professor Chomsky raised. We should also remember that the Republicans didn't particularly like Bill Clinton. Remember? So this is not exactly new. But what is, and why they didn't like Clinton relates to what Professor Chomsky was saying. But with Obama, I mean, he was black. I mean, do I need to repeat that? No. I mean, you have to understand what happened on election night 2008 to millions of people in this country. Yes. They went to bed and then they woke up and they said, this is a white republic. How the hell do we have a black man in the White House? This is a white republic. It goes back to what I was saying before, right? And you see, the thing is, when your approach is based on the assumption that this is a white republic and the rest of us are guests, then there is no room for compromise with someone like Obama. None. It doesn't matter whether you agree with him. He is a guest at best. And for them, he's an unwanted guest. So there is no room for a discussion. This is not, you're not dealing with rational people, which is part of the problem on the reverse end, that Obama never seemed to get. That they wanted to cut his legs off, and I'm only saying legs because I'm being videotaped. Right? They wanted to cut his legs off, right? And he continued to believe that there was peace in our time, right? When these forces wanted his annihilation. Now, where I would disagree with Professor Chomsky is that I actually think we have a multi-party country. It happens to exist within 2 organizations. One that's called the Republicans and the other that's called the Democrats. But they are not, those are not parties. Those are electoral blocks. And the description that Professor Chomsky gave of part of what's happening in the Republican, I absolutely agree with. The rise of right-wing populism, which you could understand as a movement against the future. That's what they are. They're a movement against the future. They're a movement to hold back the future. They're a movement to hold back the demographic changes. They're a movement to hold back the changes of a multipolar world. They're a movement to deny climate change, right? I mean, they're a movement against the future. And they are in this constant battle, as he pointed out, with the Republican establishment. It's also interesting that the so-called, what were once liberal Republicans, no longer exist. People like I don't mean just because they're bad, I mean like people like Nelson Rockefeller, there's no room for them within the Republican Party. And the Democrats have clearly moved as a party to the right, although you have within the Democrats a progressive section that operates almost as if it is another party. And that's where the strategy and tactics become very complicated.
So we're gonna take both those questions at once, and then they'll respond.
My question is about whistleblowers, and I've been sending a postcard every week to Chelsea Manning, and I've been having a good correspondence with John Kiriakou, and I think a lot of us might not know about. The Nation magazine had a good issue 2 issues ago about Obama coming down hard on whistleblowers, and John Kiriakou was one of the 9 that Obama has put away. John Kiriakou got the CIA honored person, but exposed for us waterboarding and other torture. He got 30 months in Loretto Federal Prison, but Obama wanted 45 years for him. I want to know, what is the role of whistleblowers and how can we support them best?
Thank you.
I'm interested in the issue of climate from any angle you want. One of them is that it is a real threat, so therefore the media is not talking about it. Or climate justice and the fact that certain classes of people are going to suffer much more faster. And also the U.S. military actually talking about it because of their concerns, I think, about migrations, wars, food shortages, etc.
Thank you.
Well, actually, I'm sure you all know, on whistleblowers, Obama has set new records. More people have been charged under Obama under the Espionage Act than in all of U.S. history. And the act is a monstrosity in the first place. Almost never used before Obama, but now used constantly. There's a major attack on whistleblowers because they are threatening something very significant. They are threatening security in the real sense of the word. Security does not mean, you look at the record, security, anybody who's looked through internal documents knows this. Security does not refer to protection of the population from actual threats. It refers to the protection of power from the population. Look at internal whistleblowers are threatening them. They're threatening to expose power to scrutiny. This is actually understood by the intellectual elite. The professor of the science of government at Harvard, actually, that's the name of the position, science of government. It's ironic.
Noam, could you put the mic closer to your mouth?
He once pointed out that power is strong when it remains in the dark. Exposed to sunlight, it evaporates. That's correct. Power has to remain in the dark. If it's exposed to sunlight, it's in trouble. And the whistleblowers are exposing it to sunlight. That can't be tolerated. And what can we do to support them? Well, we have to be active and energetic in confronting them. And we can't do it in its usual ways. As far as the climate issue is concerned, I think we can't overlook the fact that this is the most serious problem that the human species has ever faced in its roughly 100,000-year history. We're facing the prospect of real serious prospect of destruction of the possibility for decent survival. And it's already happened. It's not just typhoons. Species destruction now is at the level of 65 million years ago when an asteroid hit the Earth, ended the age of the dinosaurs, and opened the way for the development of mammals. Now it's species destruction is at that rate and increasing. And it's the anthropogenic climate change. And it's affecting us. You may have seen an article in the Boston Globe a couple of weeks ago of a commission that studied how Boston could deal with the expected rise in sea level. The answer is basically no way. The main suggestion was to turn it into Venice with roads replaced by canals, gondoliers. That's a rich city. Go to Bangladesh, where hundreds of millions of people will be faced with destruction, with rising sea level. It's it's an imminent problem. And what happened Tuesday, the most dangerous thing that happened Tuesday is that climate deniers, climate change deniers are being put in charge of the Congressional Committee.
I know.
Whether they believe it or not is another question, but they're committed to it. Maybe in their spare time they give money to the Sierra Club. I'm not joking. But in their position as managers, they're dedicated to maximizing short-term profit and gain and forgetting what happens to your grandchildren. That's the capitalist ethic to which they're committed. That's lethal. It's nothing ever has happened that's more serious.
Yeah, just quickly. In terms of whistleblowers, I think this is where it becomes very important to point out that focusing on Obama the person is irrelevant. It's the Obama the administration, and that administration as consistent with the tendency that we've been seeing since the 70s, of the growth of authoritarianism in the major capitalist powers. That something that Nicholas Poulantzas called authoritarian statism, and something in more recent terms I've called neoliberal authoritarian states. That we're seeing this restriction on basic civil liberties, democratic rights, ability to speak, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing that across the board. And so this issue of the whistleblowers is entirely consistent with that tendency.